The price Australia can sell its coal for is crucial in making the industry profitable and securing jobs. Coal companies simply need a better deal.
We are hopeful that prices will improve, and we're also expecting demand to continue. Now, I don't think there will be a big bonanza in terms of additional employment, but we're hopeful that the coal industry will remain viable and will continue to employ large numbers of people well into the future.
The crowd at Singleton's coal discussion days gets smaller every year. The council says that's because few people have complaints or concerns with the local industry. Others have described Singleton as a model mining community.
That's the great thing about Singleton, is that you manage to have all this mixed land use with really a minimum conflict. I think it's a great model for the rest of Australia, more Singletons everywhere.
But in Singleton alone, 1,500 jobs have been lost in the last 3 years through industry restructuring. It's hoped no more jobs will go, with the region's coal deposits secure.
The Hunter Valley is unique in New South Wales. A lot of our other coalfields only have 2 or 3 economic seams, but in the Hunter we have 20 or 30 seams which are economic, so there's enormous resource here.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
From one of the fastest dirt rounds on the world calendar to one of the tightest on tar. After his debut in Finland, Michael Guest couldn't have asked for a more different event for his second outing in the Hyundai World Rally car.
A rally here is all second, third, fourth gear corners, and the average speed is much slower. Finland's a much more flowing event, and really I would say I think it was an easier prospect than what I've got to face in the next few days here.
While tarmac isn't Guest's surface of choice, his teammate Kenneth Eriksson is a sealed road specialist, and freelance driver Bruno Thierry has been helping the Australian set up the car. But after 3 days of pre-event testing, he's found the San Remo Hills more challenging than expected, thanks to the recent downpours in the region.
The amount of rain that Italy have had with landslides and floods, and there's so much water seeping out of the mountains and running across the roads, and you spend 80% of the time on the wrong tyre.
Rally San Remo starts in Italy tonight. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Justin Norris really was coming home, just like he did for bronze in the Olympic final of the 200 metres butterfly. The excitement not lost on children who refused to stray too far from his red Ferrari. Fans lined the street in a show of support which included their own Norris war cry. The Hunter School of Performing Arts played the theme from Rocky, and Justin really did feel like he was flying now.
Well, unbelievable. It's been great. Love being home, love being Newcastle, love being Stockton, and really, I haven't seen this many people walking around in Stockton for a while.
The same children by Justin's side at the beginning ran a guard of honour for the 5-kilometre round trip, maybe being spurred on to start their own Olympic training. Either way, Justin appreciated the support.
It really is a good thing for me to come back and say thanks to everyone and given the opportunity to do that today. It's great.
I think there's a lot of people in this country that are selling the drivers short, not just Woolworths.
We want a viable rate for the job that we do.
People in the Hunter know a good time and good bargain when they see it, and so accordingly there wasn't much room to move in Derby Street. After a year's break, the 10th annual Derby Street Fair came back with a vengeance, promoting the theme Reclaim the Streets.
This year's the focus on a family-friendly event, and we want to encompass the inner-city lifestyle and the hip area that Newcastle City Centre has to offer.
50,000 people swarmed around the main street, drinking in the action on stage and literally on the ground. For the hungry wanderers, the main attraction was the $6 across-the-board menu at every restaurant. But for those who didn't want to pay a cent, there was one way to get food, via the spaghetti eating competition.
Such diverse area and broad spectrums from the valley, from the lake and the inner city itself. Everyone really seems to come together on big events.
The spirit of the fair, for the most part, was good-natured. Catherine Turner, NBN News.
As far as racing conditions go, today's couldn't have been much better. A cool day and the track near perfect. Spectators lined the Mount Sugarloaf circuit to catch a glimpse of some of the country's best, and sometimes that's all they got. The fastest can complete the 3-kilometre course in around 4 minutes, but getting out takes a little longer if you get a flat tyre. There's no tow trucks on this track. Others had their pride punctured on a stretch called the Rock Garden. The tough section claimed plenty of victims. Defending series champion Jared Rando, though, managed to stay well clear of trouble, winning by just 0.4 of a second over former world junior Nathan Rennie.
Some 200 sites are named on the proposed heritage list. Another 500 have been listed on a supplementary directory for future consideration by council.
We want to hear what the community thinks. Heritage is not just about buildings that look nice, it's about the history of the community, the architecture of the buildings, their social significance.
Lord Mayor John Tate says 200 heritage buildings and sites are already protected in the city. And despite the restrictions placed on redevelopment of these sites, he says the city as a whole has benefited.
I wouldn't see it as being a restriction on development, I would see it being a resource for development. But that doesn't mean that we're going to go overboard protecting things because they're old.
Council says while buildings listed on the supplementary catalogue still need more research, the directory is used as a resource tool.
We're using the heritage study as a way of making sure that we do pick up heritage issues in the development assessment process already.
The proposed heritage list, which is part of the local environment plan, will go before council mid-next year. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
Mooloolaba Beach is often tame in terms of surf, but it almost rose just to meet the level of competition. In fact, the dumping 1 metre conditions made it a real test of who could match it with the best. With just 10 positions left for the Uncle Toby's series, racing was anything but laid back in the trial. But when North Burleigh's Nicole Moffat got out in front, she was never going to be beaten. Trailing not too far behind, Candice Falzon and Belmont Swansea's Carly Reid. Moffat cruised home to claim a spot in the series, and so too Reid, who finished third, with the 15-year-old now in the Super Series. Joining them included Central Coast sisters Kelly and Katie Graham.
There's so many young girls coming up, they're so talented, so it should be really good for the series.
The men's event was even tougher. Only the top 9 would progress through to the Super Series. Leading contender Josh Blair had his 2 younger brothers, Jacob and Shane, trialling, but neither made the cut. Surfers Paradise's Shannon Eckstein won from Glen Cowdrey.
This is something quite unique and extraordinary, and opportunities like this don't present themselves to too many people too often.
We'll be going on national camps and state camps and having just a good time.
The Pacific Cup saw 6 countries take part in the event staged at Birmingham Gardens and the Glendale Athletic Centre. It included the world champions in America, while our own Matildas featured 4 homegrown players, including captain Alison Foreman and striker Sonny Hughes. It was voted the best sporting event in the region and rewarded for staging it the Northern New South Wales Soccer Federation. Australia's gold medal domination of the 3-day event has been well documented, and Lochinvar-based Heath Ryan was one of those behind it all. He won Coach of the Year. The Hunter Region Sporting Official of the Year went to swimming's Jan Tredenick, while Leon Burwell was honoured for his outstanding service to sport with his dedication to the Special Olympics. Sporting Organisation of the Year went to Newcastle Netball, while Port Stephens Council got the gong for major contribution to local sport. The top award of the night was the Administrator of the Year, and Arthur Roberts was the winner, given his work with the Northern Districts Swimming Association. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The 505-hectare coastal stretch owned by BHP is one of the most talked about land areas in the Hunter. And while the big Australian is seeking to transfer it to the state government, Macloys has put in a submission declaring its interest in the site.
I used to walk all over it when I was a boy and sand ski over it, so we know it very, very well, and our family's been here and around it for a long time.
The developer's tentative plans include a hotel, golf course, housing estate, a new surf club and environmental works.
The wetlands themselves need rehabilitation. There are some environmental issues there, sure.
But the Lake Macquarie Coastal and Wetlands Alliance believes development and wetlands don't mix.
If you have housing right next to wetlands, you have nutrients from gardens going into the wetlands and destroying their ability to restore marine life to act as breeding grounds.
The group has also made a submission to the state government. It wants the area to become a public park. Colin Baldwin, NBN News. When Pegmont Mines allied itself with London company Billiton for 3 projects in the Mount Isa area, its new partner required it to list publicly. And it seems Newcastle was the obvious choice due to the steeper requirements of the Australian Stock Exchange.
We only want to raise $1 million versus, say, $2.5 million required by the ASX. They want us to have 400 to 500 shareholders. We don't need that, about 150.
Pegmont should list in mid-November, with share prices expected to debut at around the 10-cent mark. With 3 other companies also showing interest, the Newcastle Exchange is hoping it'll be the first of many.
There's a big gap in Australian capital markets for companies that have got between 50 and 400 shareholders, because they're too small to list on ASX and there's basically nowhere else to go. So we see that Newcastle will fill that niche market.
Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
We've been working on this since 1996.
It was no ordinary cheque presentation. The $32,000 handed over by Phoenix Technology to Maitland City Council is effectively a 12-month holding deposit on a 40-hectare parcel of land at the Rutherford Racecourse Business Park. The company is planning a $600 million manufacturing plant, building panels for low-cost housing, mainly for third-world countries, using discarded materials.
Materials such as paper, glass, plastic, timber, rubber, that are generally buried in landfill, we believe are a resource, and we can reuse them with our technology.
During the 12-month option time, an environmental impact study will be carried out and a development application lodged. If both are successful, Phoenix says there'll be 1,400 job vacancies by the year 2004. In June 1998, a 10-hectare block on Steel River was the company's preferred site, but due to size constraints, the leasehold arrangement and reports of contamination, Phoenix began looking for an alternative and found Rutherford.
It's close to the rail, we need rail access. It's serviced well by main road, and it's right where we believe to be where the major workforce is.
Maitland Council says it would be a welcome addition to the landscape.
There is a future in Maitland. We are leading the way, and this is a can-do area, that we can do it and we will do it.
Catherine Turner, NBN News.
You've heard of the singing detective, meet the musical mechanic. Today, Chris Duncan was giving workmates a taste of the talent that saw him accept an aria last night before a Sydney entertainment centre packed with people.
There's kind of so many of them that it's just like a sea of faces, you know. I wouldn't say I do that on a regular basis, but it's different. I've never done it before.
Chris won the Best World Music Album Award for Five's Embrace, his second compilation of Scottish fiddle. But after the biggest moment of his career, this mild-mannered musician now goes back to being a mild-mannered mechanic. Well, sort of.
It's excellent. They all have a bit of a dance and a muck around here every so often.
As for serenading customers...
Sometimes they ask, but not very often.
And it might not be the last musical accolade for Chris. His third album is already in the works. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, is the fourth major killer of Australians. But a new study into the disease is underway at Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital.
There's a newly discovered germ that appears to infect people with this condition and hang around in the body. It seems to evade the body's defences.
Almost all of the sufferers are smokers, or have been at some stage in their lives. And while quitting smoking is the obvious answer to preventing it, that message falls on deaf ears. So doctors are now calling for volunteers to assist in their quest for a cure.
Right, we're interested in people who are over 45 who've got COPD to test out if a treatment can prevent them getting chest infections in winter.
Marion Murphy is one such volunteer who's been on the 12-week antibiotics program and claims to be feeling twice as good as when she just used Ventolin puffers.
Before, when I got tired, I didn't realise why I got tired. And I would just push on until I just couldn't breathe.
The disease includes sufferers of emphysema and bronchitis, both of which restrict the air passages. Dr Gibson hopes to find another 20 to 30 volunteers in the next few months for a 12-month study period. Adam Harper, NBN News. Dr Gibson hopes to find another 20 to 30 volunteers in the next few months for a 12-month study period. Adam Harper, NBN News.
John and Ron Pine, named synonymous with super sedan racing in Australia, aren't racing at their home track this season. They refuse to, along with most members of the Newcastle Sedan Club, over a change in rules they say raises serious safety issues. It wouldn't have mattered. Promoter David Lander has sacked their club, which basically coordinates super sedan racing at the Tomago track, from running events there anyway.
The club is no longer employed by Newcastle Speedway, but every individual driver is free to race at this facility.
That's what happened last weekend, with only a handful of drivers electing to race. Basically, the dispute boils down to drivers disagreeing with two rule changes under the organisation NASRA, which now oversees racing at Newcastle. One being a rule that sends an at-fault driver to the rear of the field, and another that takes away a driver's right of appeal. After a heated meeting to discuss the changes earlier this month, things deteriorated badly, and now Mr Lander refuses to have any more to do with the club.
It's a disagreement that's probably not really benefiting any one party, and it's very disappointing, to be honest with you.
The Newcastle Sedan Club, though, has invited Mr Lander back to negotiate, but so far he's declined. The next round of the Gough and Gilmore series is November 25, but with the Sedan Club already seeking legal advice on the issue, it seems this race is far from over. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
"55 canoeists converged on Bulahdelah to dip their canoes and paddles for a charity race. Competitors do either a 30, 20 or 10 kilometre paddle on the Mile River, but it's not for prizes or prestige. Some even use the event as practice for bigger events.
A large number of these people also go in the Hawkesbury Classic, and a lot of these people are top in the state for their canoeing.
But it's all for a good cause. Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service is just one of the beneficiaries of the charity event.
We're fundraising for the VRA, who we've had here for a long time, and they don't get any local government financial assistance.
Kayaking wasn't the only water sport on offer either. Punters could take a $2 bet on a rubber ducky race, the proceeds also going to charity. And in good spirit, the organisers then made a contribution to the ecosystem of the river. 7,000 bass fingerlings set free. Adam Harper, NBN News.
Outsider, the Bishop got the cup from Sir Cossack and Blazing Flight. Harness racing last night at Newcastle featured the Emmental Sprint. A blistering finish by Limousine Dundee was Jason Proctor's third win for the night, with the Pacers staking big claims for the Ridge Invitational Mile next weekend.
I don't want the double chin showing or the love handle showing.
Maybe they can be perceived as being a little bit on the loose side, I guess.
I think it's great. It's just a shame there's only 12 months in a year.
Cooranbong had been home to an ambulance station for around 50 years, but thanks to increased workloads in surrounding areas and a need to be closer to the F3 freeway, the base has been moved to Morisset.
It's much more central and, yeah, it does cover a wider area quicker.
Staffed by 11 officers around the clock, the $640,000 station features an operations room, as well as training, kitchen and recreational facilities. While response times to Cooranbong have obviously changed, the service says things are better on the whole.
The location here means that it's still very close to the Cooranbong roundabout, so the time shouldn't be too different.
The station will house 3 ambulances, and there's space for another 3 in the future. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
It's not the sole competition point earned after 3 rounds that has coach Lee Sterry overly worried. It's the 8 goals they've conceded in that time. Given the new combinations at the back, it's hardly surprising. But with goalkeeper Bob Catlin now thought to be available, he will be rushed straight back in.
He's reasonably fit, so I can't see why, with his leadership qualities, he won't come into the side.
For a side that's been based around defence for the last 2 seasons, the 5-1 result against Auckland was hard to swallow, but it was made even worse given the poor execution in front of goal. However, Newcastle has been a notorious slow starter since Sterry arrived at the club, and the coach isn't getting too worked up over it.
We've been through the tough times over the first 6 to 7 rounds in both years that I've been here, so the blokes that are locals and have played with me for the last 2 years are not about to panic. We'll get going sooner or later, and I'll still be taking short odds us making the 6.
The side to play Parramatta this Friday night at home will be named tomorrow.
Newcastle has been shaken by 5 significant earthquakes in settlement, by far the most dramatic on December the 28th, 1989. In that time, seismologists have identified a major fault line running east to west and out to sea. Now an Australian Geological Survey Organisation study is underway to determine the earthquake risks facing the city. In the coming weeks, researchers will be on the streets of Newcastle recording the details of buildings to determine their earthquake vulnerability.
This will let us predict the likely losses from earthquakes and it'll enable us to transfer this through to other communities in Australia.
Newcastle Council's building surveyor Cole Sanderman believes the city's buildings are now much safer than 1989 thanks to tighter building codes.
The whole intent of the codes is to reduce the risk of death and injury to people, not so much to save the buildings proper. Buildings can be repaired after an event, but certainly to reduce the risk to people.
The Geological Survey Organisation has also recommended the city carry out an earthquake response exercise next year. Blake Doyle, NBN News.